Yeah, I basically want to talk about kind of my life after uni, what it was like in uni. And I think we will go through different phases in our life, and one of the big ones is uni. So for example, at the end of your degree, you've been studying with, in my case, a bunch of physicists or a bunch of chemists. And I think you kind of feel part of this family, right? Or you feel part of a family of, I don't know, English lit majors or something like that. And basically that all changes when you get to the end of uni, and you have to pick kind of an identity in life where I think you have to reinvent yourself a bit. So you can't just say I'm a physics student at UCL, or I'm, I don't know, an undergrad. You have to say I'm a retailer, or I'm married now, or you have to say I'm a software developer. You have to kind of pick a niche for yourself in life. In my case, I think you might know it says on the sheet I became a science teacher for a year. I was doing a PGC, a postgraduate certificate of education course. I'm not going to be doing that next year, which I'll talk a bit about. But yeah, I just want to talk a bit about my life so far, and hopefully the presentation will work correctly. So I think one of the interesting things about going through uni, getting a job, is your perspective completely changes. So like I said, I was teaching science for the past year in a C.V. school, Church of England, inner London, kind of a poor area, people from that kind of background, and also quite a posh Jewish school, and it completely changes your perspective on the students. So, I mean, I think especially if you come from a working class background and you go to that kind of school, you might not view the teachers there with much respect. You've got quite a, I guess, a biased view of the education system in some ways. But if you go to, I don't know, a different school like I did and teach there, then you can kind of appreciate the side of the education system which is really good. So you can see that basically a lot of people come from really kind of poor backgrounds in particular schools, like in my school I think, and they end up getting into a pretty decent university like I did, or they end up finding something to do with their life, and I think that's quite cool, and that's something that I kind of appreciate more after doing this teacher training course. So yeah, obviously you saw a couple of these slides accidentally. I was going to ask you what my passion is, but because I gave a talk here a few months ago, but I think you saw this. So it's cosmology, and yeah, this face is supposed to pop up. But yeah, I think one of the interesting things about doing a physics degree or a science degree is you kind of think you know it all beforehand, right? If you're in uni, you probably had that experience. And after you've spoken to a few lecturers or got a few grades on your test, you realise that you don't know it all. And I made an animation for a talk I gave before actually last time to show this. And that's sort of how it feels beforehand. You know, you feel you understand pretty much everything in your subject. And then after a few, I don't know, weeks at uni, that kind of happens. So you kind of realise that actually you almost know nothing about your subject. And obviously that makes it more interesting. But it also deflates your ego slightly, so it's, yeah. Yeah, so I think another thing you feel when you're in uni is that you're kind of a small cog in a massive machine. You probably felt that before. You feel sort of, you're just a number on an accounting sheet, you know, paying your tuition fees, you don't really account for anything. So that's one interesting thing I experienced when I was in uni, and also in my career so far. You tend to meet, I don't know, 1 or 2 people a year, or you just meet random people and have strange encounters that shows you, you know, actually I do have some sort of value, or I am unique in some way. I'm not just, you know, a tuition fee number on a sheet or an exam candidate number. So like, for example, one time I think it was in 2013 or something, I was Imperial College and the music centre, and I was sort of, I don't know, I was kind of depressed about the fact that I think I hadn't worked out what I wanted to do with my future and that sort of thing after my degree. And it was just one of these odd experiences. The security guard walked in, said something like, I can't remember exactly, he said something like, oh, I think you should definitely pursue your studies to do a PhD. I didn't in the end, but he said something along the lines of, oh, when I saw you in the room, I just kind of felt called to speak to you, or I felt like I should say this to you, that you should continue on with your studies in some way. So, I mean, I don't know how many of you have had experiences like that, but I think that's one of the interesting things about, I guess, life in general, about uni and in your career. You do meet kind of one or two people in these strange encounters that gives you, I guess, makes you feel like you've got some value beyond just your degree or just your salary, for example. Yeah, I think there's another slide I was going to show you, I've seen a bit before. So, I was also going to mention, I don't know, my sort of top tips for surviving uni. A couple of them are just funny. But, so, I guess one thing, don't drink a litre of water before the lecture starts, and then sit in the middle of a row. That's my good advice. Yeah, so don't go to the wrong room and then ask the lecturer why the lecture is wrong. That's also not a good idea. Yeah, the third one is just remember there's 250 people in the room, or 100 probably for most degree courses. I think just remember you're probably as capable as 80 or 90% of them, or all of them really. And I think you kind of have to discover that yourself, but I guess, yeah, don't feel overawed when you're speaking to people who seem much smarter than you. Yeah, so I think I don't know how many of you, or could you just maybe put your hand up if you've already finished uni? Yeah, so not many people here. So I think it's kind of a scary prospect in lots of ways, especially if you maybe got good grades in sixth form, got good grades in uni, and you're kind of projected to go in a particular direction. Obviously, for some people, maybe becoming a doctor or a lawyer, they know that from when they're 12 years old, I don't know. But for most people, it's not so constrained by what your degree is. It's not necessarily obvious. And there are lots of people in your degree course that are going to go in all sorts of different directions. And I think, I don't know, one thing I found in uni, especially, you get this in my university, Imperial College, quite a lot of people do PhDs. And I think part of that is just maybe wanting to prolong, that aspect of student life, not wanting to sort of get a proper job. I mean, obviously lots of them enjoy their research, but I think there's this temptation maybe to put it off. But I mean, my decision when I finished my PGC was basically based mainly on practicality. I thought, well, I don't want to spend 3 years committing to a PhD unless I know that I'm absolutely going to love it. It's a massive commitment. And I don't know, you've probably seen the adverts for teacher training on TV, there's quite a lot nowadays. And I just thought it would be interesting. So I think I applied for that about the end of August. And this was after I had had a few different interviews, so I had gone, I think what was it, an interview for a kind of an IT job, and I thought, well, I'm not really enthusiastic about this. And I think there was a software developer job that quite a lot of physicists go into. I thought, well, I don't really feel enthusiastic about that. So in the end, I was kind of half-hearted about it and didn't really commit to any idea. But then I think I saw an advert for this teacher training course, I don't know, on the computer, and I decided to do that. So if you don't know anything about it, I mean, you've probably heard of Teach, so put your hand up if you've heard of Teach First. Right, so it's not exactly the same as that. Teach First is you basically go into a kind of a tough school from the beginning of the year, and you're basically teaching from day one. PGC, you kind of build up to teaching half a schedule of a regular teacher, and you also do a couple essays along the way. But if you've ever spoken to anyone who's done it, it's pretty strenuous, it's pretty difficult, and this is definitely one of the most difficult years of your teaching career. So you probably experienced some sort of stress in uni and secondary school, but I think that the stress of being a teacher is a lot greater than anything I'd experienced. Probably just because the workload, if you speak to a teacher, they can testify, it seems to never go down. There's always work after the weekend is done, and you can spend hours until 8 p.m. every day, and people constantly kind of exhorted me, yeah, don't do that because you're just going to burn out, and that's what a lot of teachers do. So there's that aspect of teaching. Yeah, I think there's a lot of other kind of more personal experiences you have. So for example, I was in my second placement. You've got 2 placements. So the second placement is February until about May. In my second placement, I had quite a difficult class, and part of the only reason they were behaving in my class was because their head of year, who was the class teacher, was sitting in the back. But it was definitely one of the most interesting kind of experiences and interesting classes I taught, because I was definitely one of the only teachers that they actually paid any attention to. I mean, partly that was because, like I said, the head of year was sitting at the back of the class. But you get a massive feeling of satisfaction knowing that 15 or 20 12-year-olds who actually, they don't really pay any attention to their parents or to any other teacher or listening to you. And they definitely got something out of it. And that was, I think, a massive boost during the year. So, yeah, I mean, the teacher I mentioned, he was, I think he's been teaching for about 30 years. And he also came from a physics background like me, and I think that's the other thing. If you're thinking of going into teaching at all, you meet a really, really big kind of range of characters. Obviously the students as well. Like there was one student in the school I taught at, he'd already come up with a patent for an invention like by the age of 16 or something. But this particular teacher, he was really interesting because he'd been teaching for 30 years. He'd done, I think, a PhD in physics a long time ago. And I had quite a lot of interesting conversations with him, just talking about the physics background that we had in common, and just talking about education in general. I think that's definitely one of the things I appreciate about my PGC. It's the people you meet. It's the teachers who are experienced who can help you. Yeah, and I think it's also the little things that you appreciate. So, for example, me and some other teachers would play football on the weekends, or on the Fridays at the end of the week. And I think at the end of my first placement, around December or January, one of them gave me this little piece of acrylic with kind of all our names carved into it. And I think random gestures like that are sort of what they give you a confidence boost, kind of an elation at the end of a really, really difficult day, of which there's quite a lot when you're teaching. Yeah, so I think I was one of about, I don't know, 30 or 50 in the physics PGC program, and there was all sorts of people, mainly British, but there was 60, 70-year-olds. There were mainly sort of 20 to 30-year-olds, I'd say. But then there's also someone who decided not to be a lawyer anymore. He decided to teach, and there was an engineer. There's quite a lot of people, and it's quite a nostalgic feeling or a poignant feeling at the end of the year. You've all gone through this together. You've tried to sort of become a teacher to hopefully contribute something to the education system, and at the end of the year, you've realised sort of you've got through it. You finished the marathon, and that's quite a feeling of elation after all the difficult work. And I think that's the interesting thing about time in general. If when you've gone through uni, you've done a year of a new career or something, it completely changes your outlook. So for example, a lot of the time, it's easy to have a really kind of, I guess, scientific or mechanistic view of everything. I'm in uni because I picked these subjects, and I'm doing this career because I don't have a choice. And you feel like maybe you don't have so much free will or say in the matter. And I think most people go through this kind of this conflict when they're in uni. Is there any meaning in what I'm doing? And I think a lot of people, obviously, they want to find some meaning. And I think I personally went through that a lot in uni. And you have to arrive at some sort of conclusion. So especially if you're from a physics background like me, you sort of, there's a how answer to everything. Why does the sun shine? It has, because the nuclei are fusing or something. There's not necessarily a why answer to why it's shining in terms of any meaning or value, though. I think one of the interesting things about going through life, going through a PGC, going through your career, is you realize there's more maybe inherent meaning in your career just in the people you meet and in the experiences, rather than maybe just a sort of black and white view of your salary or your degree. And you don't really appreciate that until after you've had those experiences. Yeah, so I think there's one thing, I don't know if you know any physics, there's one word that always crops up in physics. It's called emergent structure or emergent effects. And basically the idea is, I don't know if you look at the coast of England, it looks like a bunch of squiggles, and as you zoom out, you can see the familiar shape. Whereas you look at the galaxy or the universe, you see basically random clumps of matter, and it doesn't look like anything in particular. But as you zoom out, you can see this what's called emergent structure. You can see galaxies, you can see patterns in the universe. And I think a lot of your life decisions and a lot of your experiences are a bit like that. So, kind of looking at the choices on the small scale, you don't really see any pattern. It's just kind of meaningless, random information. It just looks like random choices, and there's no kind of inherent value in it. And as you zoom out and you see, the trajectory of your life, and you have more perspective, you can see that you might not be going where you thought you were going, but you're actually progressing somewhere. You're going on some sort of journey, but you don't necessarily know where it's going to end up. And that's one of the things you don't really realize when you're kind of, living in the moment during the day on the roller coaster ride. Yeah, and I guess one other thing I'd mention is I think in uni, in your career, obviously, kind of in your whole life, you have to struggle to find your identity, don't you? And that kind of along the way, you meet people that you clash with or that you mesh with, and you sort of maybe dismiss what they think, or you accept them based on superficial reasons. I think one of the most interesting people I met was, during my degree, he was a senior tutor, so he was in charge of kind of the pastoral stuff. And I had quite an ambivalent view. I was kind of in two minds about him. I thought, well, he seems a bit stuck up or a bit snobbish, or he seems quite rigid, doesn't seem like a nice guy. But he died of cancer, I think, was it just after I graduated, and there was lots of testimonies on him lots of testimonies of him at Imperial College, and I read one of the kind of testimonies, and it was interesting to get a completely different perspective on him. So I thought he was quite a rigid person, as I said, quite stuck-up, snobbish, and not really any sense of humour. And then I was listening to one of these PowerPoint presentations on his life, and there was a photo at a conference he'd done when he was a postdoc in uni, and he and his friend had sorry, let me just get past this. But these Groucho noses, you know, when they were trying to take the official photo. So every time the photographer would say, "We're going to take it," he'd put these on, and then eventually they just gave up and took it like it is. So I don't know how old he is here, this guy. But I think it's just interesting, you know, when something like that completely changes your view of someone and maybe reverses what you thought of them. And yeah, I think that's part of life's journey, part of your career or whatever, is just, you know, meeting those people, forming impressions that are not just superficial and being informed by that. So, yeah, I think that's the end of the talk, so thanks for listening.